The Pitchsider. Pitchside for every game.
Hello and welcome back to the Pitchsider Podcast. So a lot happened this week. We've had the Women's FA Cup final. We've had the first leg of the semi-finals of the Champions League, Europa League and Europa Conference League. We've also had a full round of fixtures from all of the leagues in Europe. Plus a little bit more from playoff from League 1, 2 and 3 and the national leagues, as well as much more to talk about. So let's get into it. Let's start with the Champions League for this week. So we've had two games, as I've mentioned. So we've had Real Madrid versus Man City, which ended 1-1. And we've also had Inter Milan versus AC Milan that ended 2-0 to Inter. So pretty much starting with the City game. City game was sort of a very end-to-end game. So Man City seemed to dominate in the stats of this game and looked the better side in the first half, and then in the second half Real Madrid were looking to be the better half. Vinicius Jr. scored against the run of play for Real Madrid, one of the best goals you probably will see this season. And then Manchester City then also equalised under Kevin De Bruyne, 1-1, leading them going back to the Etihad this week, leading to a sort of more of a final game. So both of these games are one game off the final now. It could go anyway. Man City are normally better at home. More predicted that Real Madrid were going to do better in this game than they did. But you can never rule out Real Madrid. They are a very good team. Probably will go to the final. Either team that goes to the final probably will go and win this competition. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting one to see. Probably. Now I've seen the two teams play, probably would say City, but you never say never in football. Pep Guardiola has a sort of tendency to overthink some of these games, and Real Madrid beat Man City last season. So yeah, so it's going to be impossible to call this game, and probably will go down to the wire. So it'll be interesting to see. The other game that happened was a Milan derby. Which ended 2-0 to Inter Milan through goals through Dzeko and Mkhitaryan. Unfortunately, AC Milan sort of seemed to struggle in this game. Definitely needed some killer edge, but they haven't been able to beat Inter Milan all season. And unfortunately, it looks like Inter will probably dominate in the second leg and will go through to the final. So it looks like it's probably going to be an Inter Milan versus Man City final, with Man City probably winning their first Champions League ever. They definitely sort of have the team to go and win this competition now. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see whether they can progress. So yeah, so it's going to be an interesting final. And yeah, good luck to both teams. Moving on to the Europa League, again we've had two games. We've had Juventus versus Seville, which ended 1-1, and we had Roma via Leverkusen, which ended 1-0 to Roma. So Juventus looking to win this competition after being knocked out, and probably are one of the favourites to go on in this competition. However, Seville will manage to dominate them in this game, and only Juventus managed to earn a late minute equaliser in the 97th minute from a 2-yard header after Paul Pogba superbly put in the ball. So yeah, it looks like it's going to be an interesting one. Again, opens it up to both teams going through. Both teams are very good to get this far in the competition. Seville obviously have knocked out Manchester United in the quarterfinals and have won the Europa League a record time, so they do love this competition. So it'll be interesting to see whether they can knock out a Italian Juventus. And the other game in this was Roma versus Bayer Leverkusen. Some of this seemed to be sort of a master versus the apprentice, Jose Mourinho versus Xavi Alonso. Descended 1-0 to Roma. Roma obviously winning the Conference League last season for the first time. and look to do a back-to-back in Europe, winning the Europa League, hopefully securing their spot in the Champions League. So yeah, this could be an interesting one. If Juventus get through in Roma, it could be an all-Italian final. So Italian clubs done really well this sort of year. Yeah, definitely been interesting. And yeah, good game for Italian clubs in this. No English teams in this competition. In the Conference League, we had Basel versus Fiorentina, which ended 2-1 to FC Basel. And then we also had West Ham versus AC Alkmaar from the Netherlands, which ended 2-1 to West Ham. West Ham did well, got penalty and Antonio after going 1-0 down. They look to progress after getting knocked out in the finals. In the semi-finals last season, they want to progress further and try and win this competition for the first time. It'll be the first time in a number of years since West Ham have won a European trophy since 1980. However, David Moyes wants to sort of keep to win this cup because it's probably likely to keep him in a job. If they don't win it, they're probably likely to sack him. He's had a successful run in the last couple of seasons with them, but this season they are sort of near the bottom of the table. So unfortunately, they're not going to be able to. But yeah, definitely interesting one to see. But yeah, probably likely final of this is going to be West Ham versus Basel. My prediction is probably West Ham will probably go on and win this competition, but all the teams to get through to semi-final have done well. They are doing really well, and I wouldn't rule out any team. But obviously some teams have more star quality than others and have more financial resources, like West Ham. Let's move on to some English football. A lot to talk about in here. Start off with some women's football. No, we don't normally talk about women's football, but we've had the FA Cup final between Manchester United and Chelsea. Today, Chelsea managed to win this 1-0 through a Sam Kerr's tapping goal, making this the third successive win of Women's FA Cup that Chelsea have won, and it was in front of a world record crowd for a domestic game. Kerr, who's netted 6 goals in this competition, firing across from Harder, and celebrated with her trademark backflip. And this Chelsea have never been defeated against United, but they nearly went 1-0 down with a early goal, but unfortunately it was ruled offside for Manchester United. But Manchester United did really well, but Chelsea always carry through, and they've managed to win this a number of times. The record attendance was 77,390. I'm watching at Wembley, and it looks like the FA Cup is definitely Chelsea's. It's their first time they've been FA Cup in their history, and they look to face a close battle with United in the Women's Super League and try and get the double, which they've done a number of times. But yeah, definitely interesting to see. Obviously, women's football's up and coming now in the UK, with a lot of people going to watch this game, and it was a big game. More friendly atmosphere from some of the fans. They're all fans sit together, and there's no sort of away end divide. But yeah, definitely good. Before we get on to some of the other news, Chelsea have near 99% signed their new manager, which will be Pochettino, which is the football's worst kept secret at the moment. He will look to be coming on a 3-year deal for Chelsea. So it'll be interesting to see whether he'll be able to turn around Chelsea's fortunes this year or next year. And it'd be interesting to see who he keeps, who he loans out. But there's definitely been a number of rumours that Chelsea have been linked to, with a number of goalkeepers and strikers being linked. The 4 players that have sort of been linked at the moment are Lautaro Martinez from Inter, Alex McAllister from Brighton. We've also had Martinez, goalkeeper from Aston Villa, and also a midfielder of Declan Rice. So it'd be interesting to see whether Chelsea will be able to sign all of these players. Martinez from Inter would be a interesting signing, as he's obviously played really well with Lukaku. So if Chelsea do keep Lukaku, it'd be interesting to see how their partnership links up at Chelsea. And obviously when Lukaku was at Chelsea, he was one of the players that he missed apparently. So it'd be interesting to see whether they can get that spark back in the Premier League if Chelsea do sign him. And Chelsea always been linked to Declan Rice, battling Arsenal for this. And yeah, Martinez, the goalkeeper who plays for Aston Villa, obviously wants to sort of be first team or a Champions League team. So I doubt he will probably end up moving to Chelsea, but interesting to see. But yeah, let us know whether you think Chelsea's appointment of Pochettino is right. Before we get on, we're going to have a look at some of the quick playoffs. So we've had some finals, some semi-finals. So in the National League South, we had Oxford City versus St Albans City. Oxford City won this 4-0 to progress into either a semi-final in the playoffs, like a playoff of the National League, or whether they get promoted to National League. I'm not 100% sure yet. Kidderminster Harriers in the north beat Blackburn Lee Town 2-0 to progress. League 2 playoff, Bradford versus Carlisle United is due to start at 7. Notts County have achieved promotion to League 2, and they join Wrexham in their promotion. After a 2-2 draw against Chesterfield, ended 4-3. In the semi-finals in League 2, Salford beat Stockport County 1-0 to progress to their finals. Bolton Wanderers and Burnley drew. I think there is a second leg here. And Sunderland beat Luton Town 2-1. A lot of people were expecting Luton to come up. Coventry and Middlesbrough in the Championship also ended 0-0. So these will go to their second leg to decide who will get through. So interesting teams coming up. Obviously, most people will focus on the Championship as that is going to the Premier League. As we mentioned in the Premier League, we will now just talk about some of the games that have happened. We haven't had any games midweek for this week because of the Champions League. So we've had Leeds versus Newcastle, which ended 2-2. Aston Villa versus Tottenham. Aston Villa beat Tottenham 2-1. Chelsea drew to Forest 2-2. Palace beat Bournemouth 2-0. Manchester United get back to winning ways with a 2-0 victory over Wolves. Fulham beat Southampton 2-0, confirming Southampton to be relegated. Brentford beat West Ham 2-0. Man City beat Everton 3-0. And Brighton beat Arsenal in a shock victory 3-0. Some of these results have started to solidify some of what is happening around in the Premier League. So having a look at the table, Man City remain top, but Arsenal, after losing to Brighton, now are 4 points adrift. Man City do have a game in hand, but it does mean that Arsenal, with only 2 games to play, can only get 6 more points from their games, which means they would be on 87 points. So all City have to do is win their next game, and they have confirmed to be Premier League titles. Unfortunately, Arsenal have slipped away this bit. So unfortunately, it looks like they're not going to be able to win a trophy this season, which is a bit of disappointment for Arsenal fans. Have obviously the best Arsenal team we've seen in a long while. They need to sort of keep some of their players and solidify. Probably they need to develop their defence a little bit more. They seem to be losing. They seem to be able to score, but just can't seem to plug the gap at the back. Newcastle remain third despite drawing. Manchester United have closed the gap, so they're both on 66 points, but have extended to a 4-point gap between Liverpool. So it looks like both of these teams all got 3 games to play. So the fight for the top four is definitely on. Brighton remain the best of the rest, with Tottenham slipping down to 7th. Brighton also have a game in hand on the 3rd, 4th and 5th places, so it looks like they could join the fight. So it'll be interesting to see if Brighton get Champions League football. Villa remain on the rise with Brentford. Obviously Chelsea weren't able to capitalise, so it looks like they are going to be stuck in the bottom half of the table this season, not being able to get 10th off Fulham. Further down the table, as we have Southampton have now been confirmed to be relegated with only 6 points they can get from their last 2 games, and Leicester on 30. With the massive goal difference, it doesn't look like Southampton will get this, and it almost confirms their relegation. I think Leicester need 1 point to get this. Leicester and Leeds obviously remain in the bottom. Leeds got a crucial point in their game, as Forest looked to get a point and are safe currently. But yeah, it looks like it's going to be between Forest, Everton, Leeds and Leicester to be the next 2 clubs to go down. My money is probably on Leicester and Leeds. I don't think, unfortunately, Big Sam has had too many games to unfortunately win this. But yeah, they managed to get decent points. Whether they can get 3 to try and open it up a little bit might help them out. But unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen. And Leicester City seem to be the worst apart from Everton. So it looks like it's going to be an interesting end to the season. But yeah, it's definitely definitely something to think about with Leicester going down their big club. Just talking about Southampton as well, and they've got key players like Ward-Prowse. Probably opens up him leaving now. He's definitely a Premier League player, so it's going to open up, see where he can go. It probably won't go to any of the top teams unless it is Tottenham, but yeah, could be a good addition for any of the teams that need to solidify midfield. He is a solid player, definitely a rotation player for some of these teams. Unfortunately, I don't think he'd be able to break into a Chelsea or City or Arsenal midfield, but he could be a big good signing for maybe a team like Liverpool. Definitely good rotation. He's a solid player, and Liverpool definitely need reinforcements, and being Premier League proven and having a team around him, he definitely could add something to that Liverpool squad. So they haven't been linked to him, but whether it will be a good signing or not, it'd be interesting to see. But they definitely do need a revamp of their midfield, but they're currently doing really well, and I think they're the only other team apart from City who have 5 wins in the last 5 games. So yeah, definitely watch this space. Finally, let's move on to the Europe segment of this podcast. We'll go through some of the leagues, but we will start off with the Netherlands League. Feyenoord have beaten the Eagles to win their second only Dutch Cup of the century, thanks to a comfortable win over the go-ahead Eagles. They won this 3-0. If you normally don't watch sort of the Dutch League, normally Ajax dominate this. Unfortunately, they haven't this season. They're currently sitting 3rd with PSV in 2nd, but Feyenoord have had a demanding league, over 11-point gap at the moment in their title, so that's why they have won this league. So yeah, definitely Trump. They've won 16 titles, but in their history, but 2017 was their only prior success since 1999. The owner Slot took charge of Feyenoord, being linked to Tottenham with the mandatory vote. So their current manager Slot, after being linked to Tottenham in 2021, took them in charge and has done a revamp of their squads. And has led them to winning this title. So congratulations to them. Elsewhere in the Dutch league, The Ajax game has been abandoned due to fans throwing fireworks on the pitch twice, and the players were taken off at the 6th minute as smoke bombs were thrown before a fan ran onto the pitch with a banner calling for the grenading board to resign. 3 minutes before the restart, more fireworks were thrown. The referee then called off the match in line with new Dutch rules. In the Dutch Cup between Feyenoord and Ajax last month, a lighter was thrown into a crowd and hit Klaassen and cut his head. The FA decided all games were to be stopped if a player or an official was hit by something from the crowd. It also says the game would temporarily be stopped if projectiles is thrown that does not hit anyone, and if it does happen a second time, the game would be stopped. It's the 4th time in the Dutch match this weekend alone where temporary halts. So obviously Dutch fans we don't talk about this too much, but we don't like to see this in many. We don't like to see this. We don't like to see games abandoned. Fans pay good money to go and see this, and just for a few fans to ruin the experience and injure players, and it's not nice. Definitely don't want to see this in football, and definitely good rules by the Dutch FA to postpone a game, but unfortunately I think this game should be played behind closed doors, so it's definitely going to ruin some of the fans' experience, but I don't know too much about the history of this club, whether they've got a bad board or not. We'll see, we'll see what follows from this. So moving to La Liga, we've had news out of Barcelona this week that Sergio Busquets is to depart the club as a free agent at the end of the season. It hasn't confirmed whether he'll be retiring at the end of the season. It looks like he's probably going to go out to Saudi to earn that money and join Ronaldo and potentially Messi out there. Dutch league looks to be a growing league. The Saudi Arabian league looks to be a growing league, so it'll be interesting to see whether these players join or not, but hasn't been reported who he's going to go to, whether he will be a free agent, retire, or maybe take up a coaching role. It'd be interesting to see, but it's a sad loss for La Liga, being one of their most experienced players. So some of the results from this weekend: Malaga beat Cadence 1-0, Real Madrid beat Getafe 1-0, Villarreal beat Atletico Bilbao 5-1, Osasuna beat Almeria 3-1, Real Sociedad and Granada drew 2-2. Celta lost to Valencia 2-1. Atletico Madrid lost against Elche 1-0. Seville currently beating Real Valladolid 1-0, and Barcelona are to play Espanyol later tonight, with Real Betis versus Real Vallecano. The time of this podcast has gone out. La Liga, this looks to be Barcelona's cup. Currently they haven't won it yet. They still probably need to play a few more games to convince this, but they definitely look to be it. Real Madrid look to get second, with Atletico Madrid getting third back. Real Sociedad look to have claimed fourth spot, and work definitely well deserved by them. Seville climb up the table, up to 10th after their win, with Real Vallecano going down, but they are yet to play and they have a game in hand. Getafe, Espanyol and Elche look to all have been relegated. Moving on to the Bundesliga. So on Friday, Cologne beat Hertha Berlin 5-2. Dortmund beat Borussia Mönchengladbach 5-2. Wolfsburg beat Hoffenheim 2-1. Boulogne beat Wolfsburg 3-2. Bayern Munich beat Schalke 6-0. Frankfurt beat Mainz 3-0. And FC Berlin beat Freiburg 4-2. So the fixtures today: Stuttgart beat Bayer Leverkusen 1-0, and RB Leipzig beat Werder Bremen 1-0. So having a look at the table, it still remains close. Bayern Munich have 1 point difference between them and Borussia Dortmund. and RB Leipzig now are in third with a drop from Union Berlin. Feyenoord and Wolfsburg look to get those Europa League spots, closely followed by Bayer Leverkusen. Bayer Leverkusen obviously are doing really well this season, only dropped to 7th on goal difference. It looks like Hertha Berlin and Stuttgart have gone down, but a late surge of form from Schalke has put them in the playoff spot for relegation, where they play the team from below to see who will go down or up. Finally, let's have a look at Serie A. So in Serie A this week, Lazio have drawn to Lens 2-2. Inter Milan beat Sassuolo 4-2. Spinarella have put a spanner in the works for AC Milan, beat Nem 2-0. Salernitana beat Atalanta 1-0. Hellas Verona lost to Turin 1-0. Fiorentina beat Udinese 2-0. Monza beat Napoli 2-0. Roma and Bologna drew 0-0. And Juventus and Roma are yet to play. So the table, Napoli obviously have been confirmed as champions. Juventus remain 6th, joint on points with Inter Milan, but Juventus have a game in hand. Lazio are sitting 4th with a loss for AC Milan, has led them to sitting in 5th, with Roma closing the gap on them. Looks like Hellas Verona, Cremonese and Sampdoria are to be in the relegation battle, with Sampdoria almost confirming to be relegated. Yeah, that wraps up this week's podcast. Check out the new article on the Pitchsider about Jude Bellingham's transfer saga and where he's likely to end up. So do give that a read, and do check out the gossip pages on there for the NFL and football. So yeah, definitely worth a visit and keep up to date with the latest news. Also do follow us on our Instagram and Twitter. The best place to get in contact with us. And yeah, hope you enjoy this episode, and thank you for listening, and goodbye.
For all the latest news, transfers, and football articles, check out thepitchsider.com. It's the place to be. Contact us on our socials. Instagram and Twitter is @thepitchsider, or via email is thepitchsider@hotmail.com.